Hello, I'm Jake Kraus, and this is my presentation on AI and consumers and the complicated relationship between the two for week 3 of the summer session of MB80 6020. AI and consumers intersect in a couple different ways. I will go through those in the order below, including the risks, how millennials are vulnerable to it, how consumers can be protected, and how it benefits customers and the businesses for their data collection. The risks are outlined really well in the video that we watched uh, on the TED Talk. The algorithms operate as black boxes that provide differing outputs and leading to content not intended. And at the same time, using private data collected, shared, and utilized with really no ethics involved behind them or necessarily a human touch involved. One great example that was included in the video was the idea that Trump rallies being watched might lead to eventually to white supremacist videos, different places where we've seen Islamic terrorist groups being tied to aid groups. Lots of different things have happened over the years, and some are more benign and just simple things related to shopping. Um, it also allows really targeted demographic usage for propaganda, misleading and damaging information, kind of like I just talked about. Another risk separate from that is job loss as AI takes over tasks done by people before. Really, a lot of things such as administrative tasks, manual labor, much as robots have taken over production lines, we're seeing that expand into more traditional white collar industry as well. And the last risk, we won't go into a lot of detail on, but at least it's worth mentioning, is that if we start depending on technology to do our thinking for us, that gets things to be a bit more concerning down the road. Millennials are especially vulnerable to the risks of AI, being the generation that grew up with the internet. I myself am a millennial, zennial, depending on which book you want to look at, and resource for the date I was born. But I certainly remember a time where there wasn't the internet, and when it was a billboard or bulletin boards and so on and so forth. But with that, not everyone developed a great safe strategy for it. It was a really kind of semi-harmless. You could get a virus, but beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot of data to share. And not everyone's evolved past that. There's an opportunity to share credentials. How many people do you know that have shared their Netflix login and shared it across a lot of folks so that they can get Netflix for free or take your pick on other different streaming services like that? Often we'll log into a Wi-Fi network and not really pay attention to whether it's secure or not. Can use risky apps or tools. So whether it's sideloading a third-party app, especially to get around an App Store restriction, downloading pirated streams of things like Game of Thrones, or any other different tool that might exist that go, hey, this is a free way to get what I want, but why was that posted and not thinking that part through? And don't even think they can be targeted by some of these tools because why? They're just one person. They can't be that interesting. And at the same time, while they're looking at all this information, not aware of how it gets presented to them. The biggest two risks are that tied to those are related to misinformation primarily, and then job loss as a definite hypothetical. The biggest risk is misinformation. The chart here comes from the Pew Research Center being done in 2018, and it shows where various age groups get their information. This by social media sources. If you look across it, you can see how many different sources are out there. And all of them get links, probably if you see it on Facebook or YouTube or trending things on Twitter, people you see on Instagram. LinkedIn's, I would think, probably the most reputable, in my personal opinion. Snapchats, Reddit, all those things, but there's really no verifiability of the source. You can't say for sure that you know where it comes from. It's not quite like logging on to, say, the Washington Post and knowing who the source is and there being an accountability tool for it. So looking at the data there, you see how the younger generations use the online tools far more than the older ones. which really makes them more vulnerable to that information I just mentioned being AI generated or was talked about in our TED Talk. If you also look at the main source of news, here's a different way of looking at the same information. How much of the younger age groups get their information online versus TV or print media, which to an extent still hold themselves to a standard for information. Maybe less so now than before, but certainly more so than random citizen journalists that you find online. The other risk is job loss. These are some basic charts that you can get looked at. There's some more information you can see attached at the end, showing the biggest areas that are likely to be automated through AI here in the near future, and really going to hit hard, especially in the younger age groups and the immigrant demographics. Production, food service, transportation are all very obvious ones, but surprisingly, things like administration and maintenance, and even things like legal services have a potential of being automated in the not so distant future. Now, how do we protect consumers from all of these things? There are three areas: law and government, technology, and implementing ethical business practices. Law and government can operate in three major areas. The first being regulation. Some of these regulations may sound familiar, some might not, but the biggest one that's been most newsworthy has been the General Data Protection Regulation that the EU put into place last May. It's a very comprehensive policy, including how online data is handled for customers, and how it's secured, and fines for not doing that. Coming soon, we will have the California Consumer Privacy Act, which will take effect next year in 2020. But the interesting thing on these is even though they might be geographically enforced, so the EU regulations are really enforced on companies and entities operating in the EU, most of those firms have a global footprint and have a tendency to prefer to operate under those regulations around the world. So you've seen a lot of changes at Google and Facebook to comply with it because it's a lot more complicated for them to comply with it in one country and not another. Enforcement has tools related to, in the US, the Federal Trade Commission, and then through GDPR, it's a little more complicated in the EU, but each nation has a supervisory authority that's coordinated at a central board. Another way that government is working on it is providing some basic tools and privacy frameworks. Here in the US, the National Institute of Standards has been working on a particular one to help out with that for companies and businesses trying to find their best way to navigate this. Technology. Technology can protect us from technology, oxymoronic as that can seem sometimes. The first big thing is encrypting data. When you leave your data unencrypted, it's easy to get intercepted in between. If it's on a server, how many times have we heard about passwords being left in plain text, servers being hacked? If it's encrypted, it's a lot harder to get at. The basic thing is always look for that HTTPS in your browser bar. More complicated and not getting into a lot of detail is blockchain, which essentially is an encryption format that allows the document to be signed and then any changes tracked. And the way it works is decentralized, so you can't necessarily hack the central system to change the signature. You really can't hack the whole system. It's the thing, that's how Bitcoin works, is based on blockchain technology. Constant software updates. How many of you have Chrome that you're using right now and gets updated all the time? If you're on Android, you get your monthly security update. If you're with one of the better manufacturers, Apple frequently puts out patches for its operating systems and things of that nature. You get updates for various software all the time that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, really trying to patch those holes as they come up. Using anonymized browsing online, whether that's using the private mode in your browser or a virtual private network to create a private network connection. If you go to the Forbes site listed there, you can find some other different things that give a lot of ideas on how to do it and gets into a lot more detail. The last way to protect consumers is ethical business practices. I got this list off the Salesforce website, and some of them include it's really focused on transparency, giving consumer full control over how their data is collected and used, how to update their privacy preferences, not a really Byzantine process of calling anyone, but a simple process of going through and checking and reading, having a clear and strong privacy policy, opting in for data use instead of opt out. Verizon, I know when I was with them, had an opt out policy for a advertising thing, and all of a sudden I was getting advertising emails and texts that I really didn't want, and had to dig through 4 or 5 pages on their website before I found the opt out button. Ideally, you should opt in at the beginning of the usage or during it. Google does this annually with their privacy checkup if you use Chrome. Be transparent in how the data is used. Where is it going? What do you do with it? Delete information upon request. That's been a big thing. Part of GDPR has been, how do you do that? I know for Google, you can log online, you can look at it, and you can delete your information. It's a little scary sometimes to see how much there is, but at least you have to deliver it, or you can delete it. Make sure you're providing the strongest protections possible, so stay up to date on your software as well. And then be timely and honest when you do have issues. Nothing generates trust like at least being honest. You might lose trust because it happened, but at least you were forthright. People get far more upset when you hide it. This chart's a little harder to read. There's some different ways, really the statistics showing how that works for ethical business practices. Benefits for there are benefits for customers and businesses. Businesses get product optimization and marketing opportunities. Customers get a simplified shopping experience and relevant marketing. I love knowing that Amazon knows what I want. This list comes from the CIO website. Ways to improve that you can improve your business through it, including personalizing services, custom promotions, helpful feedback, any of those different things where you've interacted with, say it's an Amazon or your favorite shopping site, and being able to see this information is made available to me. Hey, you might want to buy this. Amazon is really good at it. That's why I mentioned them. You get that little thing if you have the app on your phone. You get a little notification saying, hey, this item on your wish list is for sale. Those type of tools are customized to you. And obviously for the business, that's great because they get to then upsell you something you might not have otherwise purchased. Benefits of the data collection. You can get personalized discounts and offers, the connections between digital experiences and in person, but it's really a continuum if you go all the way through here to do this. Probably, unfortunately, this did not copy well, but to look at the website, you can get a really better feel for it. But especially proactive customer service, history. I shop with REI. I know REI can go online now and track my history and say, oh, you bought these sunglasses 2 years ago. They have a limited lifetime warranty. Here, we'll just swap them out for you and we'll do the paperwork for you. That's a great service that I love the personalization of. In conclusion, AI and big data are a mixed challenge for the future. Some of those challenges that we talked about are some misinformation, job loss, data protection, but at the same time, there are still benefits to customers and businesses. Thank you for your time, and I hope this presentation was informational to you. And last but not least, here's some additional sources that were used but not referenced during the presentation directly. Thank you. Good night.